Today I've been asked to talk about the nexus between the party and government. And this is a very familiar topic that many of us tend to want to ignore, but it exists. The Constitution of Zimbabwe is very clear that every single time there are elections, the party that wins and the president that wins elects a government, appoints a government. So at times we have opposition leaders who then masquerade as confused charlatans, and they try to confuse the citizenry by saying separate ZANU-PF from government. Legally it's impossible, because it is the president who's the first secretary of the ruling party, ZANU-PF, who then appoints his cabinet on one hand, which is the executive, and then he appoints his Politburo on another hand, which is the political leadership. So for you to mistake any identity that there's no relationship between the party and the government would be amusing. What am I saying? As long as you're a government official and you're sitting in this room and you're elected by the government or you're appointed by the government that was established by Comrade E.G. Munanga, but then you are ZANU-PF. Did you test it? I'm not going to say but as long as you are sitting here as a leader and your letter was approved or appointment by the conferment of His Excellency, it means you are party cadre deployed here. That's why we vet you politically, we vet you financially, we vet you technically, and we even go to vetting you religiously. So that when we appoint you, we know that the vision of His Excellency is not appointed from top down, it's appointed from bottom up. That's how development works. So the nexus between the party and the government is clearly not understood, because I've been watching the presentations. Comrade Tama will find, I'd like to educate your staff. What started first was not TSP. What started first was the manifesto. The political manifesto, whenever a party is going to the elections, they create a manifesto which simplifies to the citizenry what they hope to achieve when they get into power. And that manifesto can cover 10 years, it can cover 2 decades, it can cover 50 years, but there has to be a promise, which is a social and political contract between the ruling party and the people of Zimbabwe. And even before the president went into power, even before ZANU-PF was confirmed to be the winners of the election, the normal Jack and Joe and Jill needed to understand and appreciate kuti kana ZANU-PF yakakutonga vari kuti vachaitei. That's why when you go into the manifesto, it speaks about anti-corruption, it speaks about employment creation, it talks about infrastructure development, it talks about social services, it talks about us creating a prosperous and happy citizenry. When that has happened, the elections are over. The president then sits down and he has a decision of calling for a council of elders around him, who then go on to narrate and simplify what government should do. That's why in Politburo people have titles: Secretary for Education, Secretary for Mines, Secretary for Lands. And when you look very closely, every single Politburo member is with a ministry of government that they're supposed to supervise. Then the president will go and say, fine, here are the politicians who will help me assess kutonga kwangu. Then he says, whom shall I appoint from those who are elected as members of parliament into my government to implement what? The manifesto. And the president then says, fine, I'm appointing this comrade to be minister so-so, this comrade to be minister so-so. But the president is also allowed 5 appointments who are non-political. Who then says, but there are certain skills that need people who have been there and done it. So I'm going to need a minister for sport. But I think I said that Tori Munanambo Manyo over sports. That's how every Nanambo Bakujam, Nanambo Tamo Bora. What is you? Tine gold medalist case to Coventry. No, we are panning, but you're going to do this for ZANU-PF. Once Gatori Funda, but was that one it's famba child to Takavapa task. Chuya Kuno Comrade Mubira. I must MP as to we are meeting Minister Wang. Mufam said on education. This is how a government is formed. Then it says, I want to appoint my technical staff. And the Constitution says the president is allowed to appoint 2 men, or 3 rather. The first one being the minister, the second one being the permanent secretary, who is the head of ministry. And for assistance, he then has the liberty of appointing a deputy minister. I'm saying liberty because he's not forced to do so. He can appoint a minister, but he can choose to not appoint a deputy minister. You see, in Zimbabwe, we have many people who are now educated by Dr. Bubu and Dr. Twitter. And sometimes they want to relate people's opinions to be facts. Your opinion is what comes out of the desires of your mind, the desires of your heart, and sometimes a lot your confused lifestyle. But the fact is the law. That's what we talk about when we stand before podiums. We are guided by the law. So having done that, the president says, I have a government. Then he says, here's the manifesto. I now need you to sit down and tell me how you are going to implement this manifesto. And these technocrats or permanent secretaries and these ministers will sit and deliberate. And in this case, they sat down in Nyanga and they came up with a 3-phase plan. And they said, the first thing we need to do in order for this dream of the president to happen is to agree how long it will take for us to achieve this dream. It's not a 2-year dream, it's not a 3-year dream. But then they said we want to do it in 12 years. And then they said we'll call it Vision 2030. So in 12 years, comrades, we should make sure that we achieve the vision that we want to achieve. And what followed first was that and that was TSP, austerity for prosperity. Tangatongo tenga tisina mari yacho tichungo printa mari ku Reserve Bank. When they made the flash of Kudam Road, that's a lack of sovereign discipline. Wabona vana vachenda pa Twitter vachingoshaudha vakuru vachingotaura zvavasingazive, it means it's a lack of sovereign discipline. And those 2 disciplines is what is going to shape us, and it's what's going to shape you as Mashonaland East prophets. Let me go on to say that when the president has done that and TSP was alive, they said we also then want to break the remaining 10 years into 2 parts. The first 5 years, we call it National Development Strategy 1. And the second part, we call it National Development Strategy 2, which will lead us into Vision 2030. But alas, the president had to first make sure that in line with the 2030 Constitution, as amended, there's the aspect of devolution. And devolution relates to the decentralization of power and responsibilities, fiscally. Because we have 2 types of states. We first have what is called the federal states. Nigeria, Russia, most commonly America, where every province can come up with their own acts of parliament. Abortion is allowed in one, it's approved in another. Then we have what we call a unitary state, a unitary government, where we have one head of state, one parliament, and every other law becomes subservient to national law. The start actions my bylaws. Now what's substitution or subordinate or subservient it is subservient rather to national law. Saka hatikwanise kubudisa bylaw ezichikombara DC yemvura tisinga address relation to the Water Act. Zvadero, cabinet then went into motion, started implementing. And the nexus which exists is that cabinet, whatever they do, Politburo has oversight. And unfortunately, sometimes people in cabinet tend to think that they are senior to those in the party. The same mistake most of us in government tend to think that we are senior to the party. Urumende mwana wa zvarwa ne party yeZANU-PF. Panofanira kuisisika ipapo. However, baba kana kuti mai kana vakuraira vanofanira the same capacity kuti varaire mwana. Ndosaka muchiona mazuva ano pamunonzi mukuita by-elections. We are so interested. We are so interested, my senators, nemi party leaders, vacheni. Musaise zvidzoi mukati menzvimbo dzinoda kufunga. Munomesera mwana anonzi government wamavazvara. Mukuvavisisa? Hurumende musatya kuumbira maoko kuti shoko rakanaka. Musaise vanhu vasingazivi zvokuita nezvigaro zvamemavapo. Because when His Excellency is appointing Politburo members, he looks at capacity. He doesn't look at which province you come from. And he says, that's why you find kuna vachina masa vari finance treasurer general. Vamutenda vakaiswa kuti vaite secretary general. Makatarisisa munona zvakare kuti vapo mangwana vakaiswa ministry of mines. Vazhinji havazviziva kuti he was one of the first miners vedanho vatema. He was very instrumental in amending the Mines Act. Makatarisa zvakare munoona kuti vanhu vese vari kuiswa kunzvimbo dzavari kuiswa vari kuiswa nokuti pane ka certain skill kana ka certain experience. Imi munotitorerapo muredhi musoro vasati vambobata kana mari batwa bhegi repanhamo kunzi tora chema. Ndo vamunoita secretary kana kuti wefinance kana ndo vamunoita secretary weeconomic development. Havana mbobata kana mari yekutanga kana taxshop. What is going to be the nexus between Comrade Chimsoro and the provincial economist? Vanotaura nyaya dzei. Zvinonetsa handiti? Nemi kwenyu kumakansela munoappointa munhu kuti ave chairman wefinance and audit committee. Ane gomo rezvikwereti zvakadai. Atone mbiri mara ine kukwereta ndiye vanoti aite responsible for oversight yefinance. ZANU-PF iparty yakarongeka. Saka inofanira kuti ive party yakarongeka ichiguida government yakarongeka. That's why at times you find that emotions then are the ones which determine the nexus between us, and not experience, and not pure leadership qualities. When we look at the government, it's got 3 tiers. On one hand, you've got cabinet. This is chaired by His Excellency. Then you have the provincial government, which has got a provincial cabinet, which you call Provincial Development Committee. No cabinet here, and inogara provincial line ministries, which is overseen by the Honorable Minister of State. Then you go on to a local development committee, and I'm not in management meeting here at council level, cover level, they are to local level. The district is an extension of provincial governance. Regarding the Batlema DTC, what's that? Whenever complaints from our honorable ministers, you are not running another tier of government. You are facilitating the ease of coordinating the province. That's how much saver. So when you find the DTC are not in and Mangare, kuna even no manager district. Or the district province. So we cannot come up with the provincial GDP that is my district GDP. We cannot come up with the provincial GDP that is my local authority GDP. We cannot come up with the national GDP that is my provincial GDP. That's why right now our GDP is very understated. Zimbabwe, we are sitting on 49 billion. But this is worked out on 30% of the formalized economy. 70% are business, but enjoy Zimbabwe, but they don't pay any taxes. Those are the bulk of us. So if we're going to formalize this economy, it's not been a $150 billion economy. 3 times. So the nexus between the party and the government is that when you look at these tiers at the party level, mune PCC, Garaba province, but mune Politburo, kumsoro national. Then mune provincial coordinating committees, and find out our provincial cabinet kuno. That's why His Excellency directed in 2023. Put every 3 months, after every 3 months, man can chayo. The party leadership, PCC, the PDC, munofana kusangana. And the party is supposed to do checks and balances. Tarapapi ne manifesto. So the PDP, Rutawa Provincial Economic Development Plan, is how you are going to execute the national blueprint, the economic development. But they need to engage the stakeholders of the province, in me, the party. So that tomorrow, 200 skoro, minister ndosaka muchiona president vachikurudzira kuti sanganai. District level ma-DCC yenyu anofanira kusanganawo nema-DDC vachizivana vachiudzana. Kana masvika kuma-council uku, ma-lower levels enyu eparty anofanira kusangana whether it branch or whatever level ne-council dzenyu vachinzwanana. Regai nditaure ndichiti, Honorable Minister, the policy direction of government, of your provincial government, is derived from the people. Pasipe my local authorities. My local authorities hakuna chamunofanira kuita madzimambo asinoita buy-in. Why are we saying that? Because you government side, Pasema local authorities, munanonzi mavidco nema wadco. Ward development committees and village development committees. Ward development committees are supposed to be what the councillors chair. Village development committees are supposed to report into the ward development committee. Then the ward development committee reports into the local development committee. And the local development committee reports into the district development committee, which then reports into the provincial development committee, where we then get a report which goes in front of the president. This is not what's happening. We are getting masabuku, tulikuwa na madzimambo dzimwenguwa, tulikuwa na makansela, tunowa na members of parliament, vasingatedze gwara irori, vanonanga straight kuna president. Zvino isu kwedu kana mawe, tsamba yose yamunonyora chiri chichemo na president nodzoka kumadesk edu, we ferret it back kuna wakutama ufa. Kuti ngaitedze gwara rofanira kutedzwa. The same applies to the party. We are receiving letters from DCC chairpersons, provincial chairs ngazivi. Munhu kungopinda mudistrict, kunochobikwa doro kumusha kwawo kuti baba vachaita mari vapinda muZANU-PF. ZANU-PF does not work like that. The devolution concept is a mirror of ZANU-PF's devolution agenda. ZANU-PF is fully devolved. Vakutama hufa vari muno sector of provincial affairs, imi kupati muna provincial sector wenyu. Anohead on the technical team, who supervise the district team, muchienda makadaro. Now, one of the elements which is very important is for each one of us to understand that party supremacy does therefore not mean that as a ZANU-PF cadre you just walk into the office of the minister and say, hey, me, so DCC chairman, do I want to be? That's party supremacy. No. Party supremacy is the ability for you to understand that as the ruling party is, you have the equal mandate, just as government, to ensure that we change the lives of the people in Zimbabwe. Don't mandate here to say. Not to change your life. So when we government cannot be part, but to change the lives of the people in Zimbabwe. So we owe it to the almost 17 million people now in Zimbabwe to ensure that their livelihoods are met. However, sometimes we end up confusing roles. And I'm going to touch on one agenda that you asked me to touch on, which is the role of traditional chiefs as I go, if I may. This morning, I had the honor of presenting the first security report to His Excellency on sub deals. And I've received numerous comments, Honorable Minister. Wakatangire nechifu. Akadiwe na matebelele. Imi ndima katibaraka vana venyu. So ndakatanga nekumusha kwangu. And handisati ndapedza. Just in case mufungo takaita kawanda. The Communal Lands Act is very simple and straightforward. Makaumani wanyasha watu muna kuitana pani. Mpota mtu waterera. Very wise counsel. Nova kuna minister. You have the right as a Zimbabwean. Kunogara muruzevha rwaunoda hunge uri chizvarwa cheikoko. Muchirungu anoti a descendant. Zvino imimi makaona kwakutama hufa mushanonzi village day kutama hufa. Mona ini murozvi mane kamba kanonzi kwa Muguti. Anononivunza ndakabvepi. Hakuna munhu anotama musha munhu mutema kuti ndabva njanja ndakuita hwedza mambo wekwako kwawabva nekwaunoenda vasingazvizivi. Hakuna munhu mutema asina mutupo, chero mukaradha ane mutupo. Notabarwa nemi vanhu vatema. Hakuna munhu asina mutemo, asina mutupo, asina munhu asina musha. Kambo musamanikidzei kuombera chero vachizviwa. Vanozonotaurana palunch zvanandichitaura. Chokwadi chinogwadza. His Excellency is simply saying ndakagadza a governor there, a minister of state. Anotarisa kuti government ikushanda sei. He's also saying kune madzimambo aripo akagadzwa. He's also saying kune makurukute ehurumende aripo akagadzwa. Then we have these silly Dixons who are so eager to get rich. It's an embarrassment to us as black people. If we are read by more veterans, we say no to corruption. Mashonaland East, my lands officers, my district development coordinators, you are allowing people to come from cities. You are allowing now my bogus villages. As of this morning, in the last 3 weeks, we have close to 500 cases that are investigated. The office of the President Cabinet will never wait for you to do your job. If you don't cry out to the Lord, the rocks will cry out. Honorable Minister, Minister, notinozonzwa vekupati vakuti kominista vari kufambirei. Minista ndiyo mukuru, ndo ziso rapresident muno, ndosaka vari vanochera joko. Zvino kana minista vachifamba Office ya president ndo amanda kuchimisa manje. Will not do that. Instead of taking in the ground DDC, it means you've let down the minister. It means you've let down your boss out of and it means we're going to fire you. It's as simple as that. Hatina tuki president in Elanu, pamsaka penungo zemun. Hatina daro. She where Tata National Minister and Joe in Zimbabwe, not my money, not my business. Not where Tata bit of my drugs. Kuta washori. As long as Tata didn't know about my drugs are there. Namuya test. The message is very clear. Even of the Honorable Minister. Van Zogere Bawaka Va. Hakuna munhu asina musha vanhu vatema kana ivhu reko risingaite zvine maprocesses munobva newaruma madzimambo edai haungonyuki nekuti munin'ina wakarohwa nesabhuku. You don't do that. This has to stop Mashonaland East. I also want to challenge this provincial government and this provincial party leadership. Honorable Minister Manzwa Public Service Commission is town. It's not a lie. The province had slipped out of the top 5. I will not say your number. But over the last year or two, you slipped out of the top 5. It simply means your provincial government is not fully working. Your people are town. Kuswera kumunda sande kurima. Feka mabachi ni matime uchipinda maofficers leo tumekushanda. Tunakuona ma results. We want you to be innovative. We want you to attract investors. And the local authorities have a huge role. You are the first line of legislative authority, my councillors. In our constitution, a person is exposed, a citizen, to 3 levels of legislation. There's a local legislature, you are not to council. Kanapani zikunetsa muward, particular one is Maraina. Maraina when you it means muward when you council. You're the first electoral voice. The second one is the provincial. Tita province when you Mogara passes the provincial council. The third one is a member of parliament. Do not tell some temo, but pass my laws in. Zino says Zimbabwe we now have Senate. So we need to make sure that from every level, mutemo yeku enforced. Saka muchaona ipapa kuti director welens na DDC, chairman RDC, CEO RDC, muri 4. Ndimi ma complainants ekuti land yakabiwa. Muri 4. Not even the minister, muri 4. And ndimi ma state witness. Atsamba dzikuya don't worry manje. Nekuti land ye state aibiwe mukatarisa. That's unheard of. State land is communal land. When you decide as a local authority that you want to now increase the growth point into communal areas, 2 things happen. The first part is you apply to your local government minister. The second part is that he asks the minister responsible for lands for that piece of land. You don't take it by force. That piece of land is then handed over to the Minister of Local Government, who then hands over that piece of land to you as an RDC. Then you can expand. So we are now auditing every single RDC. And this is a task that we have given to you, Wanaptama Ufa, my Secretary for Provincial Affairs. Which Mugatsirema Minister, which Mukatile Province, which RDC is expanding without that procedure being followed. Because the land that you are giving yourself as the RDC is not entitled to you. It's reserved as state land. And Zimbabwe is one of the few countries on the continent which has the law of state land. Why? Because Ivu Norataka Noratikuchengeteza, Donakaeli. We will not have capitalism over rural land. We can't do that. Nokuti mangwana kumushami mabhadha rent. Ndokwa muda atende. So we can't afford to do that. So, Honorable Minister, the nexus between the party and government is that when such things happen, the party has to know what party problem. What you put at this is the chairman with Masero Mandana and what's that and this. Van Mamuregera, Garamziba Hanuva. Hamuzimba to Ravano supporter. Hamuzim to Poyal. You don't even know their nationalities. As soon as district chairpersons, Makatuzura, Maskat Machina, power ititoro. Mona Zam Sangano, Munia Katega land $400, Akatega land $5,000. I know what's able to support and give. What do you do? Dimaramunza, Mukatme strongly power. So if this continues, watch out for 2030. Watch out. Because by 2030, we're going to be sitting power. So the party needs to protect its demography. The party needs to work with government. If government is having a problem enforcing the law, the party needs to echo loudly. That's why we're a secretary for security. No basaraki. Secretary for security party. I told the police that we are up, do what you got to care. But we also have criminals within the party. Now, Matsotsi, Amaka elected him, Alimon party. So, Kanaba Biwa, Baba, I need to Baba. Those are more than Baba. As late. So, I want to appeal to you that just because the president is extending grace to the province does not mean Amnama problems. Just because the president has not addressed it to the chairperson or the national chairperson has not spoken about it does not mean Amnama problems. Discipline your own children. Simsanga. We want to see your provincial disciplinary committee Chishanda. Comrade Ningina Kanzaland, Gawa discipline. Chagajita Manika Land, 5 year suspensions is because the province at that time did not also accept Shinujamangama. Zimwe Janopita Zokuti, you are house criminals. Shatu Bonama, I am the drug lord, they are never about to plug at dragons and no to drugs. Army part. Munoto Messiah is the government. Not Canada Shikama DCC chairpersons, out time of Achabonequatsuna. If we superintend your own structure, we will superintend our own structure, and then we report to the principals. But Musatwe Basari, nobody will not tell you about someone. Asima Batite Basari Namsuda, which is no Sunga. Most of the years, about a comrade in Tabata no Nabitari, Suraivana, Moisan structures Chayu. My economists, my district economists, you were not appointed for dress rehearsals. As an economist, we want you to understand that you are appointed to extract value from your endowments. In district Mauri, Muno Zika Manechi, Muno Wanikachi, Chishinawa Kunduto district. You cannot be a district economist who says so your job is therefore to be able to magnify and amplify that these are the natural endowments, the God-given gifts that we have. I've seen videos of the Honorable Minister, Vagamila Gamafos. I should invite us today morning. No Basara district economists to come up with a strategy with how do we open up my foes and minister and create an opportunity out of it. No Basa Shakara, Direct Economic Affairs and Investments conceptualize how the natural endowments can end up becoming a good investment. So, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, my task was very easy. And I don't want to bedevil you with things that you know. But my job was to remind you Chekutanga zvoto zvine mazera. Ngatitaurei kwataswera. Because sometimes we end up throwing statements nosvika kupresidium, both party and government. The second aspect is that we work within a structure. Respect that structure, respect that protocol, both party and government. You can't be a DCC chairperson and have status. Respect that. It's as very simple as that. We want you to also, as provincial government leaders, respect your Honorable Minister of State. He will guide you because he's answerable. He signs a performance contract. Your line ministries are there for policy. They are not there for implementation. Let's make it clear. Implementation is done on the ground. Let's also have a good working relationship with the local authorities in the province. But you got to already one voice. Honorable Minister, and I was asked, on one part, you've got a multi-million-dollar investment, meaning it's supposed to attract another multi-million-dollar investment. But then, my Samarata, besides the multi-million-dollar investments on Marondel, Mu highway, Mu railway servitude, Mu take us up bail, Panjanji. And then we have the audacity that about a provincial economic development plan. Which is a bail, which take us up Panjanji. Without planning. Let's be people who think as modernized people. Let's be people who think which can still prosperous upper middle income society should not reveal. Populist strategies and decisions as councillors are detrimental to development and the sovereignty of the nation. Musaite zvinhu zvokufadzana, ita zvinhu zvinoisa nyika mberi. Bisai marata arapa. Kwese kwakanaka. Ndo gateway yematourists. Njama kuni market emarata ipapo. Mashawa kumwe. Izvozvo hazvishamise takabuda pamarata akuchena nekuseri kuti kwebheka. And yet that could have been an industrial zone, an industrial park. Makutonesa neve-railways kuti tipe kanjanji ka-bypass kanonoda chingwa kanonoda zvimwe zvinhu kanonzi raw materials. Takudaiso takananga kusvika kunjanjuku. That entire stretch can be a special economic zone. Toda vanhu vanofunga zvebudiriro yevanhu zvekucreata mabasa kwete kufadza matumbu evanhu. Munhu wamuri kupa free market ari kucontributa chii mueconomy yeZimbabwe? Bhero rasmagwa. Mari ari bhadhara iri kupuhwa necorruption kune munhu wecouncil. Asi akarwara panaende kuhospital yegovernment of Zimbabwe nemari dzehurumende yasikabhadhari. Mota yatenga nekusimagura zvinhu zvake ida kufamba parodhi dzeZimbabwe. Ezvinotane provincial employment index. Takukumezhai kuti macreata mabasa mangani. Tapota risati nyorero takacreata free market jobs. Because on one part in the province you put cotton. On one part in the province you had to resuscitate the textile industry. Bulawayo right now, 2017-2018, Edgar's revenue 34. As of last year, when the HE sent me there, and when HE then followed, back in 2000, Bashandi, Edgar's now has 34 stores. And I jet and I express in Edgar stores around the country. But I 5 must go. It means in the formal sector, something right is working. I see my policies in especially my council, and would pass that development industrialization. Jimbo dzaturi kuchengetera mainvestor imurikuita nhamo mupa developers nakana bhari. Nzvimbo dzatiri kuchengetera maspecial economic zone ndopamakuisa matax shop. So tikuda vanhu vanoti kana magara pasi taibudiriro inopanzwisa. Regai pedzisere ichitenda madzimambo. Asi ndichiti madzimambo basa renyu hariziri kuya kuzoomberwa. Madzimambo basa renyu nderekutungamira misha. That means vana venyu vesa. You have a right as the Council of Chiefs to challenge the development trajectory of the province. Kutaura kuti isati kutenderana nazvo. Namwe zvichiitika muguta. nekuti evil rinoenda under one of you. So that is very important. Honorable Minister, my prayer and plea is that you continue to call me here, because it's my home. Zvinorwadza kana uchikombaila mareports ona musha wako uri kuzasi. Zvinorwadza nokuti ndinobva kuno. Mashonaland East has got vast potential, but hatingarambe tichongotaura word potential. Takuda reality, takuda kuti mabasa akreateke. Varungu vakaenda naMitchell Courts. One of you has to start the new Mitchell Courts. We have a lot of work to do. Pazanu PF tinoti weneni tine basa. Chipagera mnenge. Sumudzei tatinosa munhu wemusangano sumudzei maoko. Kana usina kubva dhoo riri warizei. Hambe neZANU-PF, hambe neDevelopment, hambe neMashonaland East Province, hambe nebudiriro, pasi nenhunza-tunza. Tatenda.